Hello, so I'm working on a 3.5-inch cinewhoop frame, so I'm doing the build right now. It's the SpeedyBee B35 frame, as well as these Yasido motors. Now, something weird is happening. These Yasido motors, these are 2004 3000 kV motors, and they spin very freely when they're not mounted on the frame, so that's great. But once you do mount them on the frame, all of a sudden there's a lot of resistance. So I'm like, what's going on? Why is it not spinning when it's mounted on the frame? So you look closely into the mounting hole, and these motors use E-clips on the shaft rather than screws. So let me show you the motor more clearly. Here's the bottom. Some more expensive motors are going to either use a captured shaft or a screw to hold the shaft in. That shaft is what prevents the motor bell from flying out like that. But these cheaper motors use E-clips that just clip onto a groove on the shaft. But you notice that they protrude out a little, these little handles for the E-clip. And unfortunately what's happening is that the hole on the B35 frame isn't quite big enough, and the E-clip is too big, and so once you actually screw it in, the frame is touching the E-clip and causing more resistance because the shaft is the one that's spinning, and ideally the E-clip should be free to spin as well. You can see if I spin the entire motor, the E-clip wants to spin as well. But if you have the frame holding on to that E-clip, you're going to create a little bit of resistance. And so that's what's happening here, and unfortunately this is where the build kind of ends, and this is a failed attempt, I would say. There isn't, I don't think, an easy way to fix this. Like, I could drill out the frame, but I don't want people to do that. I did contemplate removing the E-clip, because technically a cinewhoop flies like this, so any thrust would actually push the belt on even more. So technically this thing could fly without the E-clips completely, but that's just still a little sketchy. Like, I don't want people to be like, okay, disassemble your motor in order to get it to fit. That's still pretty sketchy as well. So I think this is where this build dies. So in the future, if you are building a 3.5-inch cinewhoop with the B35 frame, just be on the lookout for cheaper motors that use E-clips instead of screws, because they will probably not work with this frame. I was actually looking at buying some replacement motors for this guy, and so I found the Darwin FPV 2006 motors that are used on their Cine 835 cinewhoop, and so I thought, oh, that's a 3.5-inch cinewhoop, I can use those in this one as well. But then I was looking at all the Express reviews, and someone else left a bad review on the Darwin FPV motors, and they're like, the circular ring does not fit most frames. And at first I didn't understand. I actually saw that review like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, whatever. But now coming back to it, I came to realize, oh, I know what they're talking about. So if you look at the pictures of the Darwin FPV 2006 motor, it's the same issue with this, is that those are cheap motors, and so they use E-clips instead of screws to hold the little shaft in. And so the Darwin FPV motors, I'm pretty sure, aren't going to work on the B35 frame as well, because it's the same E-clip. So yeah, I'm a bit out of a loss right now on which motors to use for a 3.5-inch cinewhoop. I know SpeedyBee has 2006 motors that I believe don't use the E-clip, which is why it works for their frame. GetRC uses like 2105.5 motors, but those are all really expensive. It's over like 60. It's like $60 to $80 for a set of 4 motors, whereas these, it's like $25 for a set of 4 motors. Once you're getting to paying like $60 or $80 for a set of 4 motors, at that point you just buy the bind and fly, because the bind and flies cost like $200, and you might as well just, you know, instead of spending $80 on the motors alone, might as well just spend $200 on the drone. So unfortunately, I think this is where the 3.5-inch cinewhoop build dies.